In this episode of The Last Frame, we're going to talk about collaboration, why you need to do it, how you can do it, and how it will dramatically improve your photography. Stay tuned. Hey gang, how's everybody doing? Happy Wednesday. It's great to see all of you. Well, I want to dive in pretty quick. So if you're here, check in, leave a comment, let me know where you're watching from. Please make sure you hit that like button down there. Share the video, let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Okay, our topic tonight, collaboration. How to do it, why you should do it, and how it's going to dramatically improve your photography. You know, photography attracts introverts. Now, I'm not saying that all photographers are introverts, clearly, but for a lot of people, photography becomes the path to better social skills and social interactions. And that was certainly the case for me. Now, I can't say that I was an introvert, but I was a very shy kid. And in my mid-teens, photography, it became my confidence builder. My camera, it became a shield that allowed me to talk to anybody, and it gave me the confidence to do so. Now, we live in a time today, 2021, when younger members of our society struggle with anxiety and social interactions. Millennials, Gen Z, Gen X. Now, I'm not saying that any generation is better than another. Seriously, all generations struggle with anxiety and social interactions. It's just that by the time you get to my age, you've usually kind of worked a lot of that out. Most people, most of you, when you purchase your first camera, and even for today's young photographers, when they begin to use their smartphones as a tool to really be creative, the camera is just that. It's a tool, a creative tool. It becomes an outlet for creativity, an outlet to be creative and to express themselves. So you see, this photography stuff, it starts out as very personal and honestly, even kind of a selfish pursuit. Now, I know that some of you are already like, hey, I thought the topic was collaboration. Why are we talking about introverts? Well, I wanted to start with discussing introverts because even the photographers who aren't introverts struggle to see the value of collaboration. And I'm ashamed to admit it, but I know that I struggled to see the value of that for over half of my career. Even when I had been in situations where I had actually collaborated on projects and they turned out incredibly well, I still was much happier and much more comfortable working on my own, which was really pretty foolish in hindsight. Hindsight is always 20/20, right? So the Oxford Dictionary, let me get the definition there. It defines collaboration as the action of working with someone to produce or create something. Pretty simple, right? And honestly, gang, here's the downside to all of this. It really is that simple. You know that old proverb, two heads are better than one? That phrase has been around since 1546. And, well, we still know because it speaks the truth. It hasn't gone away, right? So collaboration and collaborating on your photography, it's going to improve your photography, period. But here's the thing that slips past a lot of photographers. I'm making that statement. Collaborating on your photography will improve your photography regardless of the genre that you choose to photograph. Now, I should add, just like anything else in life, there are good methods and there are bad methods of collaboration, right? So if you're choosing bad methods, it's not going to help you much. So that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about tonight. But think about it. What fun would it be if we didn't have to put in a little work to be able to get good at it, right? So I want to kind of take you through my career and my experiences. I always get questions about, how I learned these things and when did it become a thing for me. So I'm going to give you collaboration through my eyes and kind of bring you to current day and everything that I've learned about it. So or at least many of you know that I started as a newspaper photographer. This was in the late 1970s. I had the good fortune of being a newspaper photographer in what many people consider to be the heyday of photojournalism. And what I mean by that, what I'm defining that as, it was a time period when newspapers were dedicating a tremendous amount of space to photographs. This is right before color became the norm, still black and white. Bigger newspapers were printing an occasional color image, but it was commonplace to pick up a newspaper and see an image 6 columns, the full width across the front page, or to open up a newspaper and find images that were printed literally across 2 full pages in the center spread of a newspaper. So it was a great time to be a photographer working in the newspaper industry. But it was also a very competitive time, especially working in a small town newspaper. We covered everything from what they like to call grip and grins in the newspaper business. That's the check presentation. This bank presented this check and X amount of dollars to this community organization, and they'd have kind of the dummy check there, and the community organization would be on one side, and, the bank representatives would be on the other side, and they'd be, shaking hands across the front of the check, that type of thing, right? So, all of that being said, the rest of the time, and I apologize here, let me just put this up because I got distracted, so I'm gonna just so you guys know why. Seraphin just watched Peter Coulson, who I don't know who that is, so let me start right there. He said collaborations are a bad idea, not sure where my feelings are on the subject. So, Seraphin, let me tell you this, and you can quote me on this. So if he's still on, feel free, go back and stir up crap. I don't care, all right? To make a blanket statement that collaborations are a bad idea, that is just stupid and wrong. It is scientifically wrong. It is proven to be wrong. Every major corporation and every top-notch creative in the world will tell you that's wrong. So my advice to you is, before you, and sincerely, before you just repeat stuff like that, I don't know this Peter Coulson person, so I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt, but it is, after all, on YouTube, says the guy on YouTube. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he meant a little bit more than that and that there was some more context to that statement. So do me a favor, because I am concerned with how people learn and I am concerned with how we interpret information. A statement like that, collaborations are a bad idea, that's bullshit at face value. So I will give him the benefit that there was a lot more to what he was discussing. So I would encourage you, instead of spending your time typing, if you're interested in the subject, listen to me. And then I'm going to assume that you're an intelligent person. You can walk away from my conversation with the information I'm going to give you and consider it. And I will be very clear throughout this conversation what is my opinion and what is scientific fact. Anything that is scientific fact, there's this website. It's called Google, Google. Check it out. You can check any of my facts, right? I'm not going to give you, opinions and facts mixed. They will be separated. So getting back to the newspaper times, late 70s, early 80s, okay? The fact of the matter is, very competitive business. We did everything from grip and grins to spot news, which could be fires, it could be car accidents, shootings, whatever, right? Period, okay? And you went out on an assignment most of the time as a photographer by yourself, right? You come in your shift, there would be actually literally 3x5 cards with the information written on it in my newspapers. And you would grab the cards and it would tell you what time, where you had to be, all that kind of stuff. And you would generally check in with the writer who was writing the article to at least get a sense of what their tilt was on the article. Now, the 18-year-old me started a newspaper business as a chief photographer right out of high school, I was not smart enough to realize that that was collaboration. Just the act of checking in to say, "Hey, I got this assignment. Is there anything specific that I should know or should be looking to photograph before I would go?" I never considered that collaboration because I was 18 years old and I was stupid. I looked at it as this photography stuff, it was all about me. I had to go out and I had to make some great pictures, period, right? But the fact is, that was collaboration. I was checking in with the writer. Now, from time to time, it would be a scenario where the writer was doing an interview, or it might even be an active news event, and the writer's going out to do an interview. And there would be another form of collaboration that, unfortunately, I never considered it as collaboration, but I always liked when it happened. And that would be where something had just taken place, and the writer would go out, and of course, they're interviewing people. They're interviewing people that they're going to cite, mention, quote in their story. I would frequently walk up next to the writer. So the writer would be standing here talking to a person, and I would frequently kind of shoulder up next to the writer or sometimes get just behind them with a 24 or maybe a 35 millimeter lens, and I would do photographs of the person talking. And the longer I would stand there, since the writer was, interviewing, the person would relax a little bit more and eventually would forget about me. And I would manage to get some really, really good kind of animated shots of these people talking or maybe pointing to what happened or, demonstrating something with their hands. It worked out great. I never considered it a collaboration because actually the writers who were, even the youngest ones were still probably about 8 to 10 years older than me at the time. They were smart enough. They understood what I was doing, and we talked about it from time to time. But as soon as they realized what I was doing, they would even, if necessary, reposition themselves or maybe take a step behind me to let me get a better view. They collaborated because they knew it would make my work better and make my job easier. But I never looked at it that way. And then I got out of the newspaper business and I opened up a portrait and wedding studio, which, I've talked about it before. I failed at it at first, eventually turned it into a very successful business. And by the time I got around to turning it into a very successful business, I had assistants that I was hiring. These assistants would help me with gear at weddings and help me with lighting at weddings. They would help me. I did a lot of like little leagues and dance schools and things like that. They would help me set up and tear down. They would help me organize the kids, all that kind of stuff. Remember, we were shooting film back then. So it's not like it was as simple as just, renaming a file or something. I never considered it collaboration, but I couldn't have done the job without them. I was paying them. So the way I looked at it, and again, I was still young and very naive. I was the boss. They worked for me. That was literally the extent of the equation. If they didn't do things the way I wanted, I got really angry. And I was probably a horrible boss in hindsight. After a couple of years, I had the opportunity to start doing some commercial advertising work. And then I picked up a food client. And that food client, I was working with a food stylist. And I was doing shots like you see here that were done on 4x5 sheet film. And these images took 8 hours to create one image. So it was literally one image per day. We started with a sketch. The entire photograph that you're seeing here was already sketched out. In other words, this is what it's supposed to look like. We would go into the studio and the food stylist would basically create this stuff, whatever it was we were shooting. She would create it to match the sketch. I would set up the 4x5 camera. I would set up the lighting. I would do some Polaroid tests. When she was finished making it, she'd put it in front of the camera. We would do some more Polaroid tests. And then by the time we had the lighting right where we want it, okay, then we would have a situation where the food looked horrible. So at that point, then she would go back, she would remake it all. And when she was done, we put it back in front of the camera because we'd already done the testing, and we shoot 3 sheets of film. Even then, I didn't consider that collaboration. And that experience, doing these food images that you see, was truly my first like real kind of one-on-one collaboration with another creative. I just saw it as, hey, it's a food project and, I've got to work with the food stylist. The food stylist I worked with was great. She was a lot of fun to work with. She really knew her stuff. And, we kind of both stayed in our own lanes. In other words, I shot the food, she made the food, done. And I was young at the time. I was like 26 years old. And I knew that I was kind of way out of my depth in terms of these were for national ad campaigns, those shots that I showed you. I knew that I was out of my depth. I knew that I was not the experienced one. So I deferred to her on almost everything. And fortunately for me, she really knew her stuff, made me look good. But I never considered it. I never realized it was collaboration. And then not long after that, I met a woman at a party. So you guys can have a good laugh here. I met a woman at a party, and it was like a Chamber of Commerce thing. And, it was what do you do? I'm a photographer. And her eyes lit up and she's like, oh my God, I need a photographer. Do you do fashion work by any chance? So I used to have a philosophy or a rule, if you will, when I was younger. Never say no. I had never done any fashion up to that point. So my response was, of course, yeah, sure, no problem. So I agreed to do it. So it turns out she was a fashion designer who had won quite a few awards, and she has started a new company. Her parents were getting older, and she had moved back to the area that I was in so that she could attend to her parents. And she had started a company. Now, keep in mind, to give you a little time frame, this is the mid 1980s now. We're talking probably 1984, 1985, somewhere in there. Kind of the Flashdance era, if you remember that movie. The name of her company was Leotardo da Vinci. She made designer dance leotards. So the first project that I did with her, she literally rented out an old building in a nearby town that used to be a conservatory, a dance school. So it had these gorgeous half-circle windows and wooden floors. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And she brought in 3 models from New York, and she brought in a makeup artist, and we planned on shooting for 2 days. I had never done anything like this. I had never lit anything like this. I had no clue what I was doing. Fortunately for me, the models were amazing and knew what they were doing. She had a very clear idea of how she wanted the models to look. The makeup artist and the hairstylist were outstanding. And I just did what I did, which was take cool pictures. And I got lucky. We established a relationship. I did tons of work for her over the years, studio work, location work. We even did a shoot once where we snuck in to the Philadelphia Zoo, meaning we didn't have permission. She had a line that was all animal prints. It had like paw prints and bear prints and that all over it. So we took the models in raincoats. We worked with just cameras and reflectors. I had 2 assistants with me. And we ran around the zoo and we would put a model in front of the tiger cage because she was in a tiger print leotard with white tights and a big 1980s hair and everything. And we'd do a couple shots in front of the cage with a lion standing right behind her looking at her. And then security would come and we'd all split and take off and we'd meet at the bear cage next. I did tons of stuff and never understood. I mean, when we did those shoots at the zoo, we probably had 8 people involved, 7 or 8 people involved in getting that shoot done that day. I never considered it collaboration. My loss. Because I know as I look back at it, I could have gotten even more out of it. I could have done even more with it. So fast forward a bunch of years. The early 2000s come along. Digital technology comes along. I'm using a Nikon D1. I think I had already progressed to the D1X at this point. And I started working with a Russian-born makeup artist. She was out of New York, and she was living in Philly at the time. She wound up moving to New York after we started working together. But we had been doing modeling portfolios together for a year or 2, and pretty pedestrian stuff, right? It was, because unfortunately, a lot of people think that models need to have these really creative images for their portfolios, which is actually horribly wrong. models need very, very basic images for their portfolios. It's not about how cool is the photographer or the makeup artist. It's about the model and her ability to model. Anyway, she came into my studio one day, and keep in mind, she was, Russian, so English is a second language. She has a very heavy accent, and she was really, really excited, and she pulls this blue boa out of her bag, the feathery boas. It's bright blue. And she's trying to explain to me, she's got this whole idea for a picture that she wants to do and everything, and it's making no sense to me at all. And she's all excited, and she's going at it, so finally I'm like, "Okay, if we have enough time, we'll do it at the end of the day." So, we get to the end of the day. We had about half an hour before she had to leave to get on a train to get home. So, I told her, "We got 30 minutes." So, she puts the girl back in the makeup chair, and she starts doing all this crazy makeup, and we take this bow, and we wrap it around the girl's face, and she had this whole picture in her mind. Like, she told me, "You have to shoot on a ladder, you have to shoot down on her, do all this stuff." And the whole time I'm taking this picture, I'm thinking, "This is kinda cool." But I had no idea what I would ever use it for. I had no idea, like, I don't know, but it's kinda cool. So we finish the shoot, we leave. She's all excited. I'm, like, glad she's happy because I still don't know. The more I started looking at this picture over the next couple of days as I'm working on this young lady's modeling portfolio, I'm like, "Oh my god, this is, like, amazing." So the next time we got together, about a week later, I said to her, "So, do you have any more ideas like this? Can we build on this?" And she's like, "Yeah." And it was at this point that I started to learn what collaboration is really, really, really all about and learn the difference that it makes. Because at first, all of these ideas were hers. Like, I had no idea where this stuff was coming from. But I've never been afraid to know what I like and know what I don't like. So at first, we would kind of do this. It's almost like a tug of war. I would call it a kind of creative tug of war. She would have this crazy idea, which tended to be much, much more extreme than my taste, but I also recognized that it was very creative. But there would be elements that I'm not a big fan of. So we would kind of push and pull, and we'd find this middle ground between the two of us, and we started creating these beauty shots. And then it got to the point where I was coming in with ideas, and then she would push and pull, and we'd find the middle. And then really what I began to realize is that the planning, the idea aspect, the input aspect of collaboration literally is taking my work to a whole new level, in part simply because it's taking me places that I never would have considered going from a creative standpoint with my work. It's also giving me the ability to create things, to accomplish things that I never would have been able to do on my own. Now, I want to put a pause here in my story, right? Because I get it. Some people don't care about my story, and that's cool. No problem. Plus, I understand we've got this whole debate going on about some other photographer in Australia. I'm going to get back to him because I still stand by everything I said, but I want to expand on that because I see there's more information here. Let me take it to the other extreme. I understand that not all of you that are here are portrait and beauty photographers. Not all of you are people photographers. And even those of you that are, I understand that some of you also like to shoot landscapes. Also, I don't know, maybe like to do macro work, maybe like to shoot architecture, do light painting, whatever. So let's challenge that whole statement before about how collaboration is going to take your work to a next level. And let's take one of the extreme scenarios, landscape photography or macro photography. We'll take both together. How can collaboration possibly make a macro picture better? Okay. So lots of ways. I used to think if somebody would have said to me, okay, collaboration, that basically meant two of us working together to create an image. Because that is kind of what the definition is, right? But if you're willing to look at collaboration a little bit more broadly, understand that two buddies, two friends, two colleagues, both photographers, both into landscape work, could decide, hey, you know what? we're going to go for a hike tomorrow. There's this mountain range. It's nearby. We want to get there at sunset, and we want to do some great stuff. Now, a lot of photographers, the younger version of me, would have said, I'm not going to go out there with another photographer because then they're going to get exactly the same stuff as I have. And that, for me, that's a no-no. That's an absolute no-no. Not going to happen. So that being said, it doesn't have to be that way. The collaboration actually takes place mostly before the pictures are taken. Yeah, you're both going to go to this area, but going to a mountain range, going to a big open field, going to any place like that where you're going to do landscape work, there's nothing that says you all have to be within a 2-foot radius of each other. And even if you are, you're not going to compare notes and say, oh, are you using a 24? Yeah, I'm using a 24 too. Yeah. No, there's no need for that. The planning and collaboration in advance is opening up an app like PhotoPills and figuring out what's going to be the perfect time to get there, to get the perfect light based on the weather forecasts, et cetera, picking out the locations, maybe going through Google Maps, doing some research on the location before you get there, looking at other images that other people have done to find the best angles and the best spots, et cetera. So that's kind of just like two buddies working together, right? Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Where the collaboration benefits you, where it excels your work when you're doing that kind of a scenario, as you're working with your buddy or cohort or colleague, and the two of you are exchanging information, your colleague is going to think of things, details that you potentially had not thought of, had not considered, would not have considered. You will think of things, details, ideas, concepts that they may not have potentially thought of and considered. So yes, there's a little bit of a responsibility amongst you and your cohort, friend, or colleague to not stand next to each other and not, fight over the best spot. No, that's not going to benefit anybody. Again, all of this requires a little bit of work, but by sharing thought processes, just like when I talk to you folks, I try to explain to you, this is what I was thinking. This is why I did what I did, so that you can not just hear somebody like this, whomever in Australia say, I don't like doing this. You shouldn't do that. It's bad. That's ridiculous. It's about being able to say, hey, this is what I was thinking. This is why I don't like it. This is why I do like it. This is why I'm thinking this would be good. This is why I'm thinking that would be good. That exchange of information, that's an exchange of knowledge. That's an exchange of thought processes. That's an exchange of things that expand your horizon, your creative thoughts, your creative abilities. Same goes for macro work. Same really goes for any type of work. Now, when you get into things like portraiture, when you get into things like weddings, when you get into things like beauty and fashion and all of those categories, right? Now that opportunity for collaboration just expands tremendously, in part because you really can't do it by yourself. Not do it well. You just can't. You need a makeup artist. You need somebody that's going to take care of the hair. If you really want to take your work to the next level, you need somebody that is going to work as a stylist. Maybe you've got an idea. And Lindsay Adler would be a great example. Frequently, a lot of the crazy outfits that you see her models in were her idea, her concept. She did a lot of it, but she still works with a stylist to polish it, to give it that extra something, because she's not a stylist. She's a photographer. So she surrounds herself. And if you folks, not to pimp my own podcast, but if you go back and you look at the Talk Chat interview that I did with Lindsay Adler earlier this year, she talks about that exact thing. We have a discussion about collaboration in that interview, and she talks about how she collaborates and why, etc. So working with all of these people that have a shared common goal to create an amazing image gives you ideas. It expands your thinking. And there's another benefit. Many of you are at a point in your photography, especially if you're photographing portraits, if you're photographing models, if you're doing all of those things. Many of you are at a point where you have taken plenty of images by now, and you've gotten back to your computer and you've downloaded them a computer and you've done your pixel peeping and realized, the hair is all sloppy down the side of the face, or it's all frizzy over here, or there's something out of place because you didn't notice it. Collaborating with other people, they become another set of eyes during the shoot. They become a set of eyes that are there over your shoulder watching and looking for those details. In fact, you can task different people with paying attention to different details. Now, I want to make a clear dividing line here, okay? Now that I've talked about working with a team and having a makeup artist and hairstylist and all that, doing those things, I want to be very clear. This is not the same as going to one of these group shoot scenarios where some photographer at their studio, it's big enough, so they're hosting like 12 people and they're going to have 2 or 3 models and they set up different sets and everybody just wanders around and takes pictures of the models. And it's a good old party time because the models are usually in bikinis or lingerie or they're nude, whatever. And, you know, one guy's shooting the model and he's trying to interact with the model and 6 other people either standing there like, or they're standing there and they're telling jokes, or they're talking to the model while another person is trying to photograph them, or worse yet, the guy's directing the model and he's trying to shoot the model and everybody else has their cameras and they're shooting over the guy's shoulder. So the poor model's standing there like, well, who do I look at? Like, I don't know what to look at. I don't know. Those situations are a complete and utter waste of time, folks. That is not my opinion. That is a fact. Let me back it up. The problem with those situations is that you, the photographer who paid your money to go and attend this, number one, you're kidding yourself. So here's part fact, part opinion. You're kidding yourself. It's really a social event. It's a fun social event. And if you're going to at least be honest with yourself, call it what it is and say, I know I'm not going to get anything amazing today, but it's a social event and I would enjoy that. Then you know what? More power to you. Go for it. Totally. But then don't come home and try to salvage something that you're going to stick up on Facebook and expect people to say, oh my God, look how cool I am, right? That's not how it works. The reason why those shoots are a waste of time and they don't work is because, number one, right out of the box, before you even pick up your camera, before somebody decides to shoot over your shoulder, before somebody decides to talk to your subject while you're trying to photograph them, before any of that happens, you don't have control. What kind of control? You haven't established a relationship with that subject. You haven't collaborated with that subject in advance of the shoot regarding what outfits they're bringing, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. In fact, in those shoots, most of the girls are going to show up with about 15 outfits shoved in a bag, and they're going to pull stuff out. So it's all wrinkled. It's ridiculous. But you haven't done any of the prep work. You haven't done any of the legwork. So you have no control. You are stuck and at the mercy of whatever happens to be there. And then you're doing your shots and you realize, man, this light's just not working. If only I could move it 45 degrees. And then 3 other people are like, no, you can't move that because we really like it. We like crappy lighting. Do not move that light. You have no control. And so what are you really learning at those events? You're not learning anything. You're not learning anything other than you shouldn't be doing this. You're not gaining images that you can call your own because even if you get a decent image, it means you got lucky. Come on, gang, be real. It means you got lucky. You didn't collaborate on that shoot. You didn't do that shot. And the worst part is there's 15 other people, even if they weren't shooting at the same time as you, they have images of the same girl on the same day with the same makeup and the same lights and the same background and the same outfits. And you want to try and show off your work that way? That's really original. So maybe I'm bullying you a little bit there, but yes, I am. I want you to see that it doesn't work. So I want to be really, really clear. When I talk about this concept of collaboration, I'm talking about the idea of working with a person or persons one-on-one, coming up with ideas. But now I want to tell you about another set of mistakes that photographers routinely make when they begin collaborating. Some guy like Joe Edelman comes along and bullies you. You need to collaborate. You need to collaborate. You need to work with a makeup artist. You got to work with somebody that's going to do hair. And finally, the day comes. And I can't tell you how many photographers do what I'm about to describe. It's unfortunate. And honestly, it's lazy. But it comes from fear and it comes from anxiety. Fear of failure. The makeup artist arrives like an eager beaver, sets their stuff up. Okay, I'm ready. What do you want me to do? Which, by the way, that should have been discussed long before the shoot happened. But nonetheless, makeup artist arrives. I'm ready. Now, I want you all to think about this. Just think about the logic here. No makeup artist is going to show up because they want to do a bad job. No model is going to get in front of your camera because they want a bad picture. So nobody is coming because they want to turn out crap. Right? But the simple fact of the matter is, as the photographer, you're the boss. Why are you the boss? You're the boss because it's a pretty safe bet. I don't think it's ever happened yet. At least I haven't caught this in the news anywhere in the world. It's a pretty safe bet that during your shoot, you are not going to have somebody barge into your studio with a gun and hold that gun to your head and threaten to pull the trigger if you don't take the picture. It's not likely to happen. So it means that nothing happens. Nothing happens. No images are created until you press the button. You're the boss. But that also means that you have to be willing to live and die by your creative decisions. Meaning, you got to have an opinion. But here's what happens. Makeup artist comes in, eager beaver. So what do you want me to do? And the photographer literally physically takes a step back. And they're like, you're the expert. Do your thing. I trust you. I saw your portfolio online. It was amazing. Go for it. And the makeup artist, 9 times out of 10, will do what they were told. They'll go for it. And then you run into that photographer a week later and you say, hey, how'd that shoot go with that makeup artist? And the photographer's like, oh man, that makeup artist sucked. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. There's this and that and everything else. The makeup artist didn't suck. You, the photographer, didn't give the makeup artist input. And this is the part where photographers say to me, but Joe, I don't know what to tell him. I've never worked with a makeup artist before. So what do I tell him? I don't know what all those brushes and all that color stuff is. I don't know what that's called. What do I say? Feel free to look at it and it's like, that powdery stuff right there, that's kind of beige. That beige, that's cool. I like that. Can we put that on a face? They'll understand what you're talking about. Okay? And if anything, they'll have a little laugh at your lack of terminology and then they'll educate you. But the fact of the matter is, you have to be willing to have an idea and live with it. Now, if that really worries you, because for some of you, and I'm not making fun of anybody now, for some of you, I understand that not knowing the right words and all that kind of stuff, I realize that actually creates anxiety for some people. I completely respect that. So how do we get around that? How do we avoid those moments that we know before the day the shoot even comes, we know that in a social situation, this is going to cause me anxiety. It's actually super simple. Just like I said in the beginning of the evening, the challenge is, though, it does require a little bit of work, right? But it's simple. You've got websites like Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest. You've got this thing called Google. We already established that. You know how to spell that now, right? You can go and you can find images in advance, not to copy. Please, that is not my goal. I am not saying Joe Edelman did not tell you go find images to copy. No, a copy, it's like a Xerox, gang. If you're too young to know what a Xerox is, Google it. But the point is, a Xerox is never as good as the original, ever. Don't do that. Unless you're going to pay the original photographer for desecrating their work, stealing their idea and desecrating. You should. I mean, honestly, that'd be the fair thing to do. But by all means, go through pictures and put together even like a mood board on Pinterest. You can create secret boards that you can share with the makeup artist and the model. And you can put boards together and say, and you put notes on there. It's like, I really love this color makeup. I really love the way the eyes are in this picture. I love the neckline on that sweater. To the models, is there any chance you have something like that? I love that hairstyle or the way that's done. Can we do something like that? And you basically find the pieces for your image so that when the makeup artist shows up, all eager for day of the shoot and says, okay, what do you want me to do? You don't have to know what to tell them. You could say, okay, so that first idea that we did where it's this hair, this makeup, that's where we want to start. Boom. Everybody's on the same page, and they even have a visual reference. So it requires a little bit of effort, a little bit of planning. Now, I know some of you still are going to say, but how do I know if putting this hairstyle with this makeup and these color gels, Joe, how do I know if that will work? That's called photography. Pick up the damn camera and try it. I'm seriously, gang, right? Like, there's a point where you do have to take a chance. There's a point where you do have to be willing to fail. But the beauty of it is if you're working with skilled people, and when I say skilled, it's all relative. You could be working with people that have the same amount of skill as you do as a photographer in their arena, meaning maybe they're not super skilled, but they have some skills and they're trying to improve too. So as a group, if you're all working towards a common goal, you're still going to get a better result. And the fact of the matter is, gang, also, let me give you some of the bad news now. You're going to collaborate with people along the way. And you look at somebody's portfolio or you look at their Instagram, you'll be thinking, man, their makeup is like amazing. And it turns out they're just really good at selecting the best images for their portfolio, and they come in and their work is just doesn't work, or they had a bad day, or the two of you just didn't really connect. It just doesn't turn out that well. That's a part of it. I have 2 videos that are linked in the description of this video about working with a makeup artist and things you need to know and how you determine, like, just by looking at pictures, is this a good makeup artist, a bad makeup artist, etc. Make sure you watch those videos. They will help you a lot with that kind of, what are the kinds of things that you should be talking about in advance? What are the kind of communications that you should have to try and avoid finding out when it's too late that this person's not a good fit? And it still happens. It still happens to me. When we're not in the middle of a pandemic, I travel all around the country and I have to hire makeup artists wherever I go. Now, the good part of it is I've been to a bunch of places now where, like, I'm going to Austin, Texas in August. I already know who my makeup artist will be because I have a makeup artist in Austin that I've worked with twice before. I really like her work. She understands what I like. Super good fit. Done. Makes my life really, really easy, right? But if I'm going to some place where I've never been before and I've got to find a makeup artist, I've got to go through that process of, 1, finding a makeup artist, looking them up. And by the way, if you don't even know where to start, how to find a makeup artist, there's this website. It's not Google. I know you all thought I was going to say Google. You could go there. But the good part of it is one of the first pages that'll show up is Joe Edelman's website. There is a makeup artist directory on my website of of makeup artists in all 50 of the United States. In fact, let me just switch over here. If I go to the website, just to show you guys how to get to it, from the homepage, just click on modeling resources. It's down towards the bottom. And when you get to this page, you'll see it right in the middle of the page. And you'll also see it over on the right-hand side. You can pick your state, and then you will come up with a list of makeup artists in that state with their contact information, links to their websites and portfolios, all that kind of stuff. This is not every single makeup artist in the United States for 2 reasons. 1, I only have so many hours in a week to find these people. But number 2, I'm selective about who goes on there. So I haven't worked with every one of those makeup artists. However, I have reviewed every one of their portfolios. So if they're listed in that directory, I would feel comfortable contacting them to do work for me if I needed a makeup artist in that area. Outside of the US, I apologize. I have not been able to expand it outside of the US yet. I would love to be able to. It's not a scenario where I'm not going to say, I won't say to you it'll never happen, but at least it's not going to happen for a little while. Okay. So, I want to go back through some comments that we have here. We also had a little bit of discussion going on, early on in the chat here. But the point is this, gang. Humans, us, you, me, the rest of us, we're all social creatures. That's science. That's fact. Some tend to be more introverted than others. Some tend to be shyer than others. Some tend to be more awkward than others. And that's not a generational thing, as I said earlier. However, at the core of it all, we are social. We are a social species. Add to that the fact that we simply understand from experience and from science that two minds are better than one. Add in three can be even better yet. Add in four can be even better yet. And indeed, you could have five, but if they're not all working on the same page, and if they're not being coordinated by one person who's responsible for kind of reining everybody in and overseeing the vision, it could also be a complete and total disaster. But so many of you, and I run into this in my mentoring group, I'm not gonna lie, right? I have people in my mentoring group that are busting their butts to improve their photography. And they kind of just keep making the same mistake over and over again because they're not working to build a great team. They're not working to collaborate with enough people. And then they get really frustrated and they decide, okay, so maybe I should buy this really cool piece of gear that I saw in some YouTube video, or maybe I should try this gimmick that, I saw somewhere else. Like some piece of gear or some gimmick is going to make the difference. Because the problem of it is any piece of gear that's a specialty piece of gear is just going to do this and that, and it's going to be really expensive. Your brain in creativity mode, especially when assisted by other people, can do almost anything. Sky's the limit. Maybe next week, if not the following week, what I am going to do for you folks is I'm going to share a presentation that I have done, honestly, pretty much all over the world at this point now, virtually all over the world. It's called Understanding Creativity, and it's deals a lot with the science of creativity and how you can improve your creative skills, both from a here's my top 10 suggestions standpoint, and also from a scientific standpoint, what we've learned, what we know about how to improve your creativity. And speaking of presentations, actually, I should just bring this up right now. While we're on the website, this Friday is the last time this presentation is going to be offered via my website. This Friday evening, 6 o'clock, exposure. What is correct exposure? That sounds like kind of a no-brainer. Oh, I got that. Let me just set this up for you. If you are proud of yourself because you know what the exposure triangle is, if you think you understand exposure because you know what the exposure triangle is, if you think ISO is important, you don't know nothing about exposure, period. You're missing out on so many opportunities, creative opportunities to make your work better. So you might want to consider this because this is coming from a guy who learned in the film days where ASA and ISO were real, were important. And by the way, back then, there was no exposure triangle. Crap. Move fast forward. ISO, it's the wrong word. I know the camera manufacturers still use it, but there's actually history as to why they made that decision. And it's honestly a wrong decision. It's a decision that I do think you'll see go away probably in the next 5 years. So might want to check it out. It's a free presentation. So you can sign up for it. The link is down in the description below the video. In fact, I'll go ahead, for those of you that are here, let me copy the link. I'll put it in the chat window that way. If you want, you can go ahead and sign up. Okay. And by the way, folks, for some of you that have attended previous online presentations of mine, this will not be recorded. If you're there, you see it. If you're not there, you don't see it. So just so you don't think you can sign up for it, like watch it the next day, that type of thing. So no, this one will actually be done with Zoom. So you'll be able to interact, have conversations with me, all that good stuff. All right. So I want to go back to this conversation that was happening about some photographer in Australia. Let's get all the facts here, at least as they showed up. I had a comment here. By the way, Joshua D, I appreciate your work. I've been trying to explain this point. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay, so who is Seraphin? The original comment, which I put on the screen before, I just watched Peter Colson live stream, and he said collaborations are a bad idea and not sure where my feelings are on the subject. So first of all, Seraphin, two things. So I've already told you, the statement that all collaborations are bad, I have a feeling that that's not exactly the way he said it. He probably provided some more information. But if that's all he said, then that's just BS. But your statement, not sure where my feelings are in this subject. Dude, it's not about your feelings, okay? This isn't an emotional thing. This is a process thing. See what works. Instead of listening to some idiot on YouTube, yeah, me. Instead of listening to or Peter Colson, both of us, why would you listen to some bozo on YouTube telling you what they do and what you shouldn't do? Hopefully you're an intelligent adult. Take that knowledge. Take the information I shared. Take the information that he shared. Try both. What do you got to lose? Like, what do you got to lose? You grow by trying it. And then you don't have to feel anything. Then you're going to take whichever method works and makes the most sense for you and clicks in your mind, and you're going to run with it, and you're going to work at it, and you're going to build on it. The methodology is not going to come to you and feel good. The methodology is something that you have to figure out what makes the most sense for me, and you've got to work at improving it and making it work for you. Now, there were some follow-ups there. So this Peter Colson guy, somebody told me, he's a fashion photographer from Australia. He uses an assistant and makeup people. Well, that means he collaborates. Maybe he doesn't like them. Maybe they have body odor or something. Who knows? But that means he's collaborating. And then there was another follow-up from who is Seraphin again. He has openly said he doesn't like using makeup people. But in this context, he was saying working with other photographers. Well, okay, once again, who is Seraphin? His example of other photographers, I'll bet you $100, $100 was different than my example. Because my example, first of all, wasn't for fashion photographers, was it? It was for landscape photographers. I wouldn't work with another photographer outside of an assistant. And as my assistant, that photographer will know coming in, they have a very clear role. This is your role. This is the expectations. This is what you do. If that assistant comes into my studio and starts saying, oh yeah, we should do this, we should do that, and starts giving the directions to the model without me, that assistant will never be back in my studio. That doesn't mean that assistants are bad. That means that is a bad assistant. So even to say that, well, it sucks to collaborate with other photographers, let's give it context, okay? Context is so important, gang. I mean, come on. You all have to be aware of this. We live in this social media world. It's a soundbite world. Everybody's so quick to pop an opinion. Well, this sucks. That sucks. But why? Let's talk about the why. If people would actually put a little bit more effort into their opinions, we could actually have discourse, conversation. And then it would be a lot easier to agree to disagree because there would be context between things. So sorry for being harsh, but that's a philosophy I will not, especially in today's world, I will never apologize for that philosophy and for setting that standard. Opinions are worthless. Give me an opinion, provide the context, and help me solve my problem. That's a great conversation. That's a conversation that I'll have with anybody because it's a worthwhile conversation. And in a platform like this, many people could benefit from that conversation. That's the point. So from Kevin Connery, I love working with stylists, makeup, hair, food, wardrobe. Best way to get the best results. Yeah, hands down. I mean, it's just that simple, gang. I mean, you can look at any big photographer whose work you admire. Forget Joe Edelman. I'm not one of those people. I'm a guy that's teaching on YouTube right now. So look at any big photographer that you admire. They're working with assistants. They're working with stylists. They're working with makeup artists. They don't do it on their own. And the best ones, like a Lindsay Adler, they're very open about that fact. They make no secrets about it. But they still do deserve all the credit. All the credit in the sense that they ran the idea, they were the project manager, they made the photography pieces work and recorded all of this creativity. Hell yeah, they deserve a ton of credit. Absolutely. Okay? So let's see here from Darko. Listening is the main part being a part of the co-op that I'm in. But as I lead, I need to know when I'm asked or suggested to take the reins. But respect is the first and foremost thing with me. Yeah, I mean, Darko, if you sincerely feel you're getting something from it, then I say good for you. I would be willing in another venue, not here, not now, because we don't have enough time. But I'd be willing to bet if we really broke down what you're getting at this point out of your co-op, it's more of a social engagement than it is actually improving your photography. And that's the context here of what I'm discussing collaboration in, okay? So, let's see here. And Martin, Joy, I love your teaching style. Have learned a lot from you. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. No need to apologize for being off topic for that. Let's see here. And scrolling on down. Matthew, I got a couple minutes. I'll take a couple questions, gang, if you have a few. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. I might actually wrap up on time tonight. That would be weird. Matthew, I was doing a family shoot and I'm lucky that my wife was there as well. She's my unpaid assistant. She saw some great shots that I would have overlooked. Plus, she makes great photos as well herself. Yeah. I mean, gang, the challenge, and Matthew, this is actually a great example. In a situation like what you're describing, where your wife's helping out, et cetera, those kind of scenarios, there's a little bit of a risk. And I'm not suggesting that you stop. I'm saying just remain aware, right? It sounds like you've got a great working relationship with your wife when it comes to your photography. It's very easy to turn the working with a friend or working with a relative as your assistant almost into the equivalent of doing a group shoot. Now, they may not be taking pictures at the same time as you are, but they may be yapping. They may not be kind of respecting you in the task that you're trying to get done, et cetera. So when you've got a situation like that, working with your wife, where she does work as a great assistant and she has an eye and she's able to kind of tip you off to things, that's awesome. And the best part about that is, obviously, the two of you spend enough time together. It will be a lot easier to cultivate that working relationship because of the time that you already spend together. You have a better understanding of each other's habits, of each other's body language. So, with my Russian makeup artist, and even now working with Monet, who's here locally to me, we always we kind of have these little pieces of code, right, that are part of our language. And that little piece of language code speaks volumes, especially with my Russian makeup artist. When I used to work with her, I would routinely have models comment either after the shoot or at some point towards the end of the shoot, you guys don't talk to each other very much. Like, how do you know what each other is doing? And it wasn't a matter of like, oh, we hated each other and we were being nasty or anything. It was a matter of they realized like we actually didn't have lengthy conversations throughout the day. And that's because we had been working together for so long that we had reached the point where she knew what I liked and what I wanted. I knew the way she worked and what she liked and what she would want. And so a couple of little words, keeping in mind that English was a second language for her. So we got to the point where, a couple little words basically were the equivalent of, you know, paragraphs. Okay. I've been very honest with you. There are times, especially when we were doing modeling portfolios, that I would be working on a shot, not one of my crazy beauty shots, but just a basic shot. And it just really wasn't coming together. Maybe, in the end, the outfit didn't look right on the girl. Maybe I had tried something that just didn't work. Any number of things. When I was working with Natalia, my Russian makeup artist, she always knew if I got my last shot and I looked at the model and said, okay, we're ready, let's move on. Thumbs up meant thumbs down, right? In other words, that was my way of telling Natalia, like, yeah, I didn't really like that. And it wasn't a matter of saying it was her fault, because I was smart enough to also understand she's watching me take the image. She knows what I like. She knows what I strive for. She knows what I'm trying to do. And so the fact that I'm finishing, that should be in her mind, like, is he really happy with that? Or should I say what I was seeing? And so, my thumbs up is basically giving the model the confidence. Yeah, we're going to move on. Okay. And letting her know it's like, yeah, I didn't really like that. And then what would happen is the model would go change in the next outfit, and the model was in the change room. I would touch base with her about, like, Natalia, with any makeup changes we needed to make or hair changes. We didn't really discuss what went wrong in that shoot unless it was something very specific. But one of the things that we also did, folks, and this is also something that's really helpful with the collaboration piece, at the end of every shoot, Natalia would either get to a train or get to a bus to go back home. When I first worked with her, she was in Philadelphia and then she moved to New York. In both cases, she traveled to work with me. So we would leave my studio and get in the car. I would take her either to the bus stop or I would take her to the train station. And during that car trip, we would basically Monday morning quarterback the entire shoot, meaning we would kind of go back through it like what worked really well, what didn't work really well, what stuff did we like, what stuff were we not understanding each other, were there any things that we kind of picked up on that we need to make sure in the future we should not do this, we should try to do that. We didn't just walk away from the shoot like, okay, cool, we're done. Yep, that's it. No, I always went through the shoot and basically, went through the um, pluses, the positives, the negatives, all that kind of stuff, because that's how you learn. Okay. Oi, Dave, just a year into photography, trying to cope with my studies. Is it time to monetize my skill yet? Uh, Oi, Dave, you are the only person who can make that decision. Um, a lot of people will give you an opinion. I can give you an opinion and saying, well, if you've only been taking, pictures for a year, that's pretty early yet. But that's just my opinion. What I don't know is I don't know, maybe you're just insanely naturally talented and your stuff is just creatively off the charts, in which case, yeah, maybe you should. I'm basing that opinion on the likelihood that a year into photography, you probably still have a lot of foundational things to learn, meaning you're probably not confident about the inverse square law and how that works. You may have a basic understanding of depth of field, but are probably not truly well versed in using depth of field as a creative tool. So if indeed you are beyond that and you are able to say to yourself, I can consistently turn out top-notch, incredible images for my clients, and if you are ready to learn the business side of photography, because I hate to tell you, Dave, the one thing they don't tell new photographers when they first get cameras, becoming a professional photographer, and there's some professionals here, so you can all chime in, tell me if I'm wrong, right? But I want you to watch. My hand's going to go up. Professional photographers are kind of idiots. Here's why. I've never met the person, probably you included, Dave, that bought their first camera, their very first camera, because they wanted to make money. We get into photography, maybe it's through a phone, maybe it's through a small compact camera, and then we get a good camera. We kind of get hooked. We get the bug, right? And then somewhere down the line, we have one of two crazy ideas. It's always one of these two. Option one, wouldn't it be cool if I could make some money with this camera? Because then I could buy some more gear and it'd pay for itself. Option two, wouldn't it be cool if I could pay my bills with this camera? Both of those ideas actually have a certain amount of foolishness to them. Here's why. It's foolish until you have truly embraced the idea that being a professional photographer doesn't mean you run around with a camera every day taking pictures and living some glamorous life. Being a professional photographer means that you have to run a business and you have to be good at running a business. And if you are good at running that business, then you will have the opportunity to pick up your camera and do what you enjoy and get paid to do it. That's simply how it works. Now, the other piece you also have to remember is that once you start doing it for money, you have clients. Those clients, they don't really care what you like and what you want. They have a reason, a why they have hired you. It's your responsibility to match their why, not to do your why, but you have to do their why. So my opinion is a year, you're probably quite not ready yet, but only you can ultimately decide that. Okay. But I would encourage you, for the sake of being able to provide an excellent experience and to provide value to the customers that do hire you, Dave, make sure you have a lot of confidence in what you're doing before you get to that point, because otherwise you're not going to be able to meet those two criteria: excellent experience and excellent value. And those are the two things that will grow your business. In fact, those aren't my words. You all should check out Talk Chat this week. Go back to my website. If you haven't seen it yet, my interview this week is with Mr. Miguel Giles from Orlando, Florida. He's a Sony artisan. He's a pro photo legend of light. And he actually talks in great length about the importance of providing value and experience and all those things. So I would encourage you, Dave, check out that podcast, listen to it. There's a lot of really, really good nuggets in there, information that will kind of help you get a really, really good understanding. Okay. All right. So let's see. A couple more questions here. Let's see if I can get them really quick. Lane, shooting an outside wedding. How would you recommend collaboration with people and their cell phone cameras? A sign, a message? No, no sign, no message. No. Okay. Um, I can't stand these photographers that are like, everybody's got to put their phones away. Can't have their phones. That's up to the bride and groom. That's what they want. Okay. The bottom line is, if you have a situation where, there's a Karen who keeps getting in front of you, then you just got to go talk, politely talk to that person and say, hey, listen, the bride and groom have hired me. Can we work together? You know, so that we're not, and you deal with it personably. But if you're going to go into a wedding and start, putting up signs and making all kind of rules, first of all, do you think everybody's going to read or give a damn about your sign? Pretty much every establishment in the United States has a sign that says a mask is required, but that doesn't stop people now, does it? Right? So signs, no. And you can't be putting down all kind of rules. Most people will be respectful of your place if indeed you are the photographer for the wedding. And by the way, that also means that you're not going to just show up and kind of hide behind everybody. You need to be there and make it known. Every good wedding photographer that I know, trust me, people figure out within like 5 minutes. That photographer, they're the photographer and they're the boss. Okay? They establish the ground, and I don't mean by telling people rules. I mean by being the one who is loud and in control and there to make sure that that wedding day goes fluidly. So I would be careful. Danny, thank you so much, man, for the super chat. I appreciate it very, very much. Let's see. And Eric, 2080 rule. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Yes, I did, by the way. I don't even know where that question came from. Mickey, I did push and pull film ASA. Absolutely, man. I was like living on the edge back then, right? Eric, 2080 rule on this. 80% of the time a professional photographer spends doing business side of things. Eric, I would argue that's pretty close. I usually use the 80-20 term with regards to like as a people photographer. 80% of my work is psychology, 20% is photography. But I would argue that 80-20 probably applies to actually running a good, solid business as well. And I mean that, sincerely. So I think that's probably a pretty good, consideration. So, let's see here. Matt, what's the best way to get a budget for collaborative work? In other words, what do you think the cost of a photo shoot should max out since many people will be involved? Matt, that's not the way you do pricing. So I'm going to give you like a really, really quick piece now. And then what I would encourage you, Matt, if you're in the US, you should join PPA. You really, really should, because they have some awesome pricing guidelines and calculators. But you got to start out with how much do you need to earn? So it's like, what do you want to earn per year as a photographer? And be realistic. If you're going to say, well, I want to earn $6 million. Okay, good luck for that. But you better get your crap together in a big hurry, right? So be honest about what you want to earn. And that doesn't matter if it's full-time or part-time. What's your earnings goal? And then you ask the second question, how many weeks a year, how many days a year, how many hours a week do I want to work in order to earn that money? And so you start doing that math down. That gives you an hourly rate. So that's the hourly rate, provided that you can actually work that many hours. So you may have to double or triple that number if you realize, yeah, I'm not actually going to work that many hours. Okay. Or you're going to work that many hours, but then you know that you've got to really up your marketing game to get that much business coming in. So that becomes kind of your cost. And then you've got all the overheads for expenses. You've got gear, you got all that stuff. And then if you're going to hire a makeup artist, if you're going to hire a stylist, if you're going to do all those things, all of that gets added in. If you haven't done it yet, you kind of need to learn how to do the collaboration part before you start charging for it. So my advice is you find people who are looking to build some collaborative work for their portfolio. And I don't mean you're getting paid and they're not. I mean, you're all collaborating on ideas. So that may mean that you have this incredibly creative idea, but it's a full-length picture. So you can still go ahead and you can find a makeup artist and a hairstylist to work with. But if you're going to collaborate and it's a trade for everybody, that means that you're going to make sure you also shoot some close-up beauty shots at that shoot after you get your full-length shot so that they get shots for their portfolio, because that full-length picture that you want, it's not going to benefit them, and so on. Eric, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Okay, gang. Whew. That was a good conversation. So, Seraphin, if you're still here, sorry for being tough on you, man, but please learn that lesson, right? Be careful the way you present information, especially if you're going to represent somebody else's information. I don't want to mislead people. I really want to make sure that we're helping people. And by no means am I saying that my way is better than his, but I would say, look at his style, look at what he does. And based on what Gabe told us, I would also make sure that you're being clear, what images of his were impacted by other photographers or weren't. I'd be willing to bet that none of his images were impacted by other photographers. When he says he hates collaborating with other photographers, he's probably talking about something that he did early in his career that he no longer does. So it's kind of an aside that doesn't really apply to where he's at now. Okay? Anyway, gang, have a great week. Got a great interview coming up for Talk Chat at the end of the week with a young photographer from Denver, Colorado, who has actually photographed some really cool people, including Michelle Obama. So look forward to that. And of course, take pictures, stay safe, stay healthy, but get out there and shoot. Because your best shot, it's your next shot, gang. Adios. Take care.